Welcome to Conversations with a Wounded Healer. I'm your host, Sarah Bueno. I'm a psychotherapist, teacher, consultant, and most importantly, a wounded healer, living and working in Chicago, Illinois.
And I'm your host, Anne Remy. I'm a counseling psychotherapist, yoga teacher, and trauma specialist living in Brighton, UK. On this show, we interview folks in a variety of healing professions, and we discuss the intersectional journey of healing self while caring for others.
But we're not just focused on individual healing, but also healing on the collective level, from white supremacy, late-stage capitalism, and the patriarchy. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, Sarah.
Hello, Anne.
How you doing?
I'm good. Last time we recorded, I was not good. Yeah. So I don't know. I was just talking to my therapist this week about really trying to remind myself that cycles and expansion and contraction is all part of the game instead of getting so worried. I think it's probably just like I've had enough suicidal ideation and like really bad depressive episodes that I get a little scared every time I get like, down.
Yeah, I get that.
So yeah, but I'm really good right now.
I love to hear that.
Yeah. Thanks. How about you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm probably going to have to go to Geneva this week on a last minute journey.
Not Lake Geneva, if any Chicagoans are listening.
Well, Lake Geneva, Switzerland, the OG Lake Geneva, if you will. Which I'm not particularly looking forward to, but I will be looking forward to the cheese.
Oh, they have better cheese?
That's the home of fondue, Switzerland.
Oh, I did not know that. Well, learn something every day.
Gonna go eat that melted cheese. So I am looking
Eat that cheese.
Gonna have a little cheese baby going on.
I support this.
Speaking of cheese babies, you can support your cheese baby, which is
they can buy a cheese toasty or a
that was so much better.
Yeah.
Speaking of cheese babies, you can buy a cheese toasty or a grilled cheese t-shirt at tinyurl.com/CWH merch. And you can rate and review our podcast at ratethispodcast.com/wounded healer.
Yes.
And you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/convos with a wounded healer. Get some top secret conversations between me and Sarah and support your favorite podcast hosts. At least we hope we're your favorite podcast hosts.
Yay!
Yay!
We're your best friends podcast host.
Oh,
we might not be their favorite podcast, but I'm going to guess we're their favorite hosts.
Yeah, why not? We're great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're humble.
Yes, very.
So, Sarah, let's talk about today's conversation with Amelia Nagoski.
Before we do that, I just have a quick funny story about her sister, Emily. So Emily's book, Come As You Are.
Yeah.
God, this was probably 2015, maybe? I don't know. Whenever the book came out, I'm guessing this is probably when it was. But I went to a talk that she did, and it was sponsored by sex therapists. So one of the things they did was a raffle with a big tub full of sex toys. Guess who won? Me.
Yay!
So Emily Nagoski gave me a vibrator. Is how I like to say it, and I've still got it.
That's great.
Thank you, Emily and friends.
Thank you, Emily and friends. And Emily is the co-author of the book Burnout with her sister Amelia, and that's kind of what Amelia and I talk about today in this conversation: is burnout, stress, a lot of the stuff that comes as a result of it, and then I get serenaded.
Well, I also just wanted to say how much I really particularly enjoyed. I didn't know she was a musician, and hearing her talk about the way that she tries to be as a conductor kind of gave me a light bulb about my experience in undergrad. Because many may not know, but I was a music education undergrad major. Never student taught, so I completely have a useless bachelor's degree because I can't do anything with it. But I can say I'm a musician. I spent however many tens of thousands of dollars to have a piece of paper that says I'm an official musician. But the choirs sort of went through a shift when I was in school and had different conductors. And my senior year, we got this conductor, Ethan Sperry. Hey, Ethan, who was so good and so like the depth of feeling in his conducting was so different than I'm not going to name one particular conductor that I really, really disliked. And I really disliked him because I am dead certain his nervous system was like closed and contracted and like in air. And I felt like, because I was a fucking musical theater kid going to a classical music school,
Yeah.
I wasn't able to like really sing the way my heart wanted to sing. I had to try to fit a mold of what these people were asking me to do. So I just wanted to tell you, Amelia, that was very healing for me to hear her talk about like that connection between music and the nervous system. And I know that she was like, oh, this is a tangent, but it was so, I needed it. So thank you.
Do you know what? She went off on a lot of tangents that to me were like, this is, yes.
I love it. Yes,
Right.
exactly.
I'm loving this right now, including her going to get her ukulele and singing a song. It was great. And
Is this the premiere of that song?
I think she mentioned she had
Oh, she's
played
recorded
it.
it before. Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
All right.
But it's the premiere of the song on our podcast.
That's right.
So, and I took a lot from that around co-regulation, and I've started leading workshops on nervous system regulation through movement and breathing. And part of that, because it's in a workshop format, is how we're doing that with the people around us. And I actually took a lot from this conversation on how co-regulation works, specifically talking about how, when she talks about being a conductor, how she's kind of holding a lot of that for the group. So it did change the way that I look at facilitation, I think, in general, which is really, really useful. And yeah, so I was just really excited to have this conversation with her. And I will kind of note to listeners that I had all kinds of audio issues on the day we were due to record. And I really wanted to respect Amelia's time. So this is not going to sound as high quality as most of our recordings do, because there was a lot of last minute kind of,
Yeah.
the British would say faffing about.
Faffing about
As one thing didn't work and another thing didn't work and then another thing didn't work. And I had a bit of a meltdown and was like, well, we're just going to do it this way.
Yep.
So it's not the same quality that you normally hear, but the conversation, in my opinion, makes up for it.
I think so too.
So without further ado, I will introduce today's guest. Amelia Nagoski, D.M.A, was an associate professor and coordinator of music at Western New England University. She co-authored the New York Times bestseller, Burnout, The Secret of Unlocking the Stress Cycle with her sister, Emily Nagoski, Ph.D. Amelia's work involves helping singers connect with their internal experiences through dynamic techniques. She lives in New England with her husband, 1 cat, and 2 rescue dogs, which sounds like a great household, to be honest.
I'm into that life.
Yeah. So please enjoy today's conversation with Amelia Nagoski. Woohoo!
Are you a therapist stepping into a leadership role for the first time? Or maybe you've been in a leadership position for a while, but you're bumping up against new struggles. It's a transformative journey and one that can be deeply rewarding, but also filled with unique challenges. Many therapists find themselves in leadership positions because of their exceptional therapeutic skills. Yet leading, supervising, or managing others requires a whole new set of competencies not typically covered in graduate school. Our Authentic Leaders group is here to help you become the authentic and wholehearted leader you aspire to be. And we believe that the journey is best undertaken with the guidance of experienced mentors alongside fellow learners. The next cohort of Authentic Leaders will run November 2024 through June 2025, meeting once monthly on Fridays for 90 minutes. We'll also have some additional opportunities for connection and support along the way. Join me in this journey of self-discovery and leadership mastery, where you'll enhance your leadership skills and forge meaningful connections with fellow therapists committed to their own growth and the betterment of the therapy field. www.headheartbiztherapy.com/authentic-leaders-group.
Amelia Nagoski, welcome to Conversations with a Wounded Healer.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Amelia Nagoski. I have a doctorate of musical arts in conducting, and I co-wrote the New York Times bestselling Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle with my identical twin sister, Emily Nagoski, Ph.D. She is an expert in sex and relationships, and I am an expert in conducting choirs. And one day we were having a conversation about the ways that our work overlapped, and then many, many years later, I was in the hospital with stress-induced illness,
Mm.
and she came to the hospital to be supportive. And what she brought with her was peer-reviewed science about how stress manifests in the body. And she had already written her first book. Well, she was in the process of writing her first book, Come As You Are, The Surprising New Science That Will Transform Your Sex Life. And that was the information that readers of her books would come to her and say, like, this one small portion of that book about
Mm.
the feelings and the emotions and the wellness, because it turns out the best predictor of a woman's sexual well-being is her overall well-being. And she was so surprised, but I reminded her of being in the hospital and how that's the information that saved my life twice.
Mm.
And she said we should write a book about that.
So while you were in the hospital for stress-induced, burnout, do we say?
I wouldn't have used the term burnout at the time, but yeah, in
Mm.
retrospect, absolutely 100%. What doctors told me was, "It's just stress. You need to relax." Which, by the way, relax, not an evidence-based intervention.
Yeah, I've heard some good ones from doctors about that.
Yeah.
So while you were recovering from burnout, your sister was kind of, in theory, maybe plotting a project.
Oh, no, not even remotely. She genuinely had no idea. Well, okay, so the problem with being an expert, as Emily is
Mm.
that she just knows all the stuff, and she understands it so deeply and so well, and she was astonished that I didn't know some of it. And one of the main contributions I made to writing the book was making Emily explain that people don't just intuitively understand the stuff that she intuitively understands.
Mm.
And like, we need to explain to people why and how. And in particular, as we got further into reading about all of the things that contribute to individual well being, focusing on and understanding that a primary contributor to individual well being is the impact of external forces, of large scale social forces on an individual,
Mm.
which is an inescapable force. And there were no books that talked about, oh, you're hospitalized with stress-induced illness, not because you're not doing the right things, not because you're not trying hard enough,
Mhm.
but because the goals that are set for you are unmeetable, are
Yeah.
unattainable, and the demands are unceasing. And this is not good for you. This is impossible, and the world has set this up on purpose to drain us of our power. And there are solutions.
Yeah, so I think what you're saying, like, this is set up to drain us all of our power, is such an important way of looking at it. And when I read your book, I remember sitting there being like, "Do they know me? Like, is this?" But then realizing how, if you two are able to write a book about this, it has to be so widespread that I'm not alone in these feelings. And so one of the sort of gifts that your book gave to me was, I don't feel so alone in my burnout, in my overwhelm,
That's great.
which was, to be honest, the first step towards being able to like work with it.
Yeah, and I mean, just the knowledge that you're not alone and that other people are
Mm.
experiencing that is genuinely healing. I mean, that's why therapy works, is like it's a connection with
Mhm.
another person who sees and understands and connects with your experiences. And we did think Emily was under the impression that my experience was really quite extreme. 2 hospitalizations and a surgery later. And looking back on the rest of my life, I'd been sick my whole life. And kind of the same
Mm.
processes had been at work my whole life. And we had thought it was, pretty extreme. Turns out we met a lot of women who were like, I just got out of the hospital, stress-induced illness. And the illnesses themselves were a huge variety of things, because stress can manifest in your body in a lot of potentially harmful ways. There's
Mhm.
no predicting how it might actually show up as disease for you, but it can absolutely show up as disease. So yeah, it turns out not only are you not alone in the doing of the thing, and honestly, when we were writing the book, I was like, I cannot be the only one who needs this information.
Mm.
And let my let my suffering not have been in vain, you know?
Yeah. What's that like to turn your suffering into art?
Yeah. So my training is in music. I have conservatory training where you focus on the performance itself. And that process of Carrie Fisher says, take your broken heart and make it into art. Like taking your own suffering and pain and turning it into something that will help heal someone else through recognition, give them access to something that they didn't have before. Writing the book was, functionally typing while crying was 3 years of writing the book is typing while crying. But the process of like, when I make music, it's the same process, but it happens more in, like the writing itself, typing while crying, the process of preparing as a conductor is a lot the same, where like I spend a lot of time digging in, not only into like the technical stuff, like the parallel in writing the book would be doing the research.
Yeah.
And then the actual like digging into what it means and making the connections between disparate sources. That's like there's a process of alchemy that kind of happens between technique and execution that you just hope results in something that will move and touch and communicate with someone who wants to hear it, who needs to hear it, who will see themselves in it.
For you, when you're in the process of conducting, like in a performance, is that cathartic, or does it feel like, the music is there, we've done all the stuff that we need to do, this is now kind of it? Like I've gotten the catharsis out. Does that question make sense?
Yes. Okay. This is actually a very big question, because the thing is that like neurologically musicians are different from other people.
Yeah.
And also music as a participatory activity is so good for people as catharsis, as a sense of safety and community, especially communal singing. Being a professional musician is like being the minister at a church. Like the worship experience is not for you, right? You don't touch God. You create an experience for the others.
Wow.
So when I conduct amateurs and students, which is most of who I work with, I create an experience for them that I hope to create an experience for them that is warm and comfortable and authentic and, everything that they need in order to be expressive singers, safe, fundamentally. But for me, it is one of monitoring and shepherding and cheerleading. Does that make sense? I'm kind of an outsider.
Yeah, no, I think your analogy was really good. It makes perfect sense. And, it's interesting you talk about creating a safe space for the people that you're working with, so that they can create, they can sing, they can feel, they can make music, they can feel free. Because if I'm thinking about the nervous system, the first thing that the nervous system needs in order to function is safety.
Yeah.
And it makes perfect sense why. And even when I read your book, I thought, wow, this is like the perfect connection for these two to be, making together.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm really interested in, you said something about, I'm really stuck on that, like creating a safe space for other people. How do you do that?
It's complicated. Of course, it's complicated.
Yeah.
But thing one is I do as much as I can to get my singers in touch with their own internal experience. I prioritize this because it was such a challenge for me. I have a condition called alexithymia, which is Greek for no words for feelings, but it's not, the problem isn't that I don't have words, which no, I don't really have words, but I also don't notice my own internal experience. Things as simple as noticing that I have to pee. I don't. Noticing that I'm hungry. I don't. Noticing that I'm full. I don't. Like, and the happy and the sad and the song when I was a kid, if you're happy and you're know it, clap your hands, baffled me. I was like,
Wow.
that's a made up thing. Like nobody knows stuff like happiness. What is it? I was in third grade thinking this consciously out loud, like not, but like in my mind, these sentences are forming. Anyway, so I had to learn so carefully using every possible technique to get in touch with my own internal experience so that I could be a good singer first, and also so that I could be a clearly communicative conductor, because nonverbal communication is so powerful that any like tension or stress or frustration that I feel gets communicated to my ensemble, whether I want it to or not. So starting to learn to like find balance in my body so I could communicate balance to my ensemble. When you talk about catharsis, and that is the part of making music that really healed me, was learning to be in my body.
Wow. So that was like the conduit for you.
Yes. And more explicitly, Tai Chi practice, because it is okay, so most conductors talk about gesture and they talk about posture, but they don't know how, like, where that comes from. And in Tai Chi practice, there's much more understanding of like your balance comes from the earth, from your cells being the same microcosm as the universe. And this is like, I don't usually talk about all this big, like kind of frou-frou stuff,
I'm loving it.
but it's just true that I learned more about conducting from Tai Chi, about balance, about alignment, about freedom of gesture and movement and intention. That's about coordinating the whole body. Most people don't need this much detail when they learn to conduct because this stuff comes naturally to them. But because I was literally deficient in my capacity for it, I learned a lot about that. And so step one of making a choir feel safe is getting them to, be connected to their bodies before they start to breathe and giving them permission to do the things that their bodies uniquely, idiosyncratically do to sing beautifully.
There must be something so healing about that for them, because even just listening to you talk about it, one of the best things that anyone ever told me, one of my classmates in therapy school said, all thoughts are okay.
Yeah.
And I was like, what do you mean all thoughts are okay?
Yeah.
And she was like, nobody else can hear your thoughts, dude. Like, all thoughts are okay. And it immediately,
That's
first
nice.
it threw me into an existential crisis. And then, I was raised religious, and I have a lot of sort of internalized, someone could hear me all the time thing going on for
Yeah.
me.
Mhm.
And so once I got over that, I was like, oh my God, all thoughts are okay. And it just took this pressure off. And I also know then from my yoga teacher training, there's no wrong way of doing a thing. Like,
Yeah.
Instagram would have you think that there's a perfect way of doing a downward dog or whatever. There's no wrong way. There's only what your body does. And that's freeing. And so that's what you're offering. And I love that. And it must be such a unique experience for them as well to receive that.
My rehearsals are not like other people's rehearsals. There is a movement inside of choral music of singers who want a conductor who's kind of a dictator. It's a conductor who is more aggressive,
Yeah.
who more feels like they should tell the choir exactly what to do. In my ensembles, when I first arrive at the school or an ensemble, the choir's singers are often like, you tell us what to do. Stop asking us to like make decisions. You're supposed to tell us what to do. It's kind of a, respect is given to those who tell you that they should be respected, right? And I'm supposed to know everything and therefore tell them what to do. And like, nope, I'm there to nurture their musicianship. I can't crawl inside their larynxes and make their voices operate different ways. They have to access it. And the only way they can access, really beautiful singing is by being in a state of like openness and freedom and joy. So my rehearsals are not necessarily like other conductors. I love it. And I think my choirs sound different because of it. You can hear in a choir when the conductor is a dictator, when the conductor is often beloved, kind of worshipped as like this, king, god. I've even had women conductors. It's not a gender thing. I've sung in choirs with women conductors who say things like, sopranos, when you do that, you make me think you're stupid. And people worship this conductor for her, scholarship and her leadership. And I'm like, she makes me feel like trash.
Yeah.
So how can I have to disregard her and her feelings and her influence on me in order to sing my best. Because if I allow her to influence me, I'm gonna be tense and my voice is gonna be tight and I'm not gonna have the most warmth in my tone that I can possibly have. Anyway, this has gone off into a very music forward tangent that I was not expecting to go on.
That's all right. If you're happy talking about it, I'm happy talking about it. I love hearing, because I think what I heard in that is power.
Yeah.
You're offering a balance of power to the members of your ensemble. And
I want them to take all the power. I mean, I sort of feel like my job is to make myself unnecessary.
I tell my clients that I'm in the business of making myself unemployed.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think it's good leadership. You don't want to be, requisite for everybody to do their own thing. And when I'm thinking about power balance, I'm thinking about when you're talking about these other conductors who, want to act like dictators. And we see this in every industry and
in government.
And it's that same sort of like, I'm telling you that you have to respect me. and rather than creating an environment where respect naturally comes. And now I'm kind of thinking about what you said about we live in a society where things are built so that we are tired, we're burnt out. So it takes away our power. We don't have power. There's no power balance there.
Yeah. One of the primary causes of, or at least sources of burnout is being stuck. I mean, that's how we define burnout in the book is there's not a state of like wellness is not a state of being. Wellness is not a state of action. Wellness is the freedom to oscillate through all the cycles of being human.
Mm.
You're supposed to experience stress, right? You're supposed to experience
Mhm.
stress and relaxation and eating and digesting and sleeping and waking. You're supposed to oscillate through all the cycles and so stress is not the enemy. It's getting stuck. That's the
Mm.
enemy, but the persistent outside demands make us constantly strive forward, push, subdue our own individual needs to sacrifice them on the altar of other people's convenience and never take resources for ourselves because 9 hours of sleep, how dare you take
Yeah.
that time for yourself. Yeah, so we are not given an option to oscillate unless we take some pretty conscious steps to disconnect from the demands.
Or unless we have a leader like yourself who's willing to help address that kind of balance and help people feel safe in order to open up to those oscillations.
Yeah, I feel like it's not me. I feel
Okay.
like just like I felt for my singers, I couldn't crawl into their larynx and make their, cricoarytenoid muscles function in a certain way. Like, I can't make a thing happen for somebody,
Sure.
but I can show them that other people are experiencing the same thing and maybe introduce them to knowledge that they're suffering in ways that they didn't know were optional. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense and is the perfect segue into me asking you how you feel about the term healer.
Yeah, I okay, I'm super literal. So, healing is a process that happens in your body, right? And then
Mhm.
healing is also a transitive verb
Mhm.
where there I heal you or you heal me. And
Mhm.
and the transitive property of healing is one that I do not understand. I am autistic though.
Yeah,
So, I think that that's probably one of the reasons that I don't the transitive property of healing is a mystery to me.
sure.
I love education and having knowledge and knowledge is power and then to take that and use it on my own. And that's what I like to do is provide opportunities like, you know, I like that there's teach and there's learn and there's two separate words for that process, right? I
Yeah,
wish healing had two separate words. I wish there was healing, which is like learning, which is a thing you do on your own in your own self, and then teaching I guess is the closest word to what I think you know what I'm saying? Have I made any sense at all?
you've made perfect sense because
Okay.
my response to this question is actually very similar with less grammar. But I actually really appreciate grammar getting involved in anything, to be honest. 'Cause I prefer the term for myself, like I prefer the term facilitator.
Yeah.
I'm somebody who can create an environment and who can bring in components that are necessary for people to do their own healing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because when I think about so like using your book as an example, reading that was incredibly healing to me.
That's exactly what I would have hoped for. Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
And I would, as somebody who's on the sort of receiving end of that, I wouldn't necessarily say like, "Oh, Amelia healed me."
Yeah.
I would say you set up the capability for me to be able to do some of these explorations and to look into this myself.
That's exactly what I would have had in mind. And if that's transitive healing, then okay, sure. I can accept that as a
Yeah.
if you tell me that's what that means, okay. Honestly, there's several things in the book that Emily and I were like, "Really, science? Science has demonstrated that this is okay, sure, we'll put that in the book," but, like, neither of us had experienced it that way. And then like 2 years later, we each got separately independently diagnosed with autism. So like, oh, that explains like why there's some differences. So, I mean, words, 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 you know what I'm saying?
But I think, you know, what's so interesting is I was just thinking about the way that you write in and of itself to me is healing because it's addressing a power balance because you're not looking at science and going, I'm just going to regurgitate this science. I'm going to write it in a way that is approachable and understandable that people can make meaning of it. Right. There's this lack of gatekeeping
Oh, yeah.
with the
Yeah.
way that you're presenting knowledge.
Well, the thing is that look, science is the best idea humanity has ever come up with, and it is deeply and problematically flawed. It
Mhm.
is it is a terrible, terrible mess, and also the only hope for our survival as a species, right? And the terrible, terrible mess is that we know so little. We have progressed so little, and we know so little, and yet science, a study comes out and scientists can read it because it's written in jargon, it uses statistical language that's difficult. Even, like, I took a statistics class in 1997, I think? No, 1993, I think. Anyway, that's the only statistics class I ever took, and Emily got a Ph.D., which means she studied statistics.
Well,
So,
yeah.
like, every time there's anything to do with statistics, I'm like, "You just translate this for me because I don't even know." But I, as a conductor, my job is to take information like what the violin part is and what the tuba part is and, like, find the relationships among them. And so as a researcher and a writer, my goal was to take these disparate pieces and find out how they're related and connected in ways that other people weren't looking at because people become experts in their thing. Flutists are experts in the flute and don't know anything about the tuba. Tubists are expert in the tuba. You know what I'm saying? So different sciences also need the same thing. And the problem is in the media. I have started writing a song that goes, journalists and government officials don't have the training to interpret hard data. And so when
But it's so sad and true.
And then, ironically, meanwhile, academic something experts, scientists don't have the capability of communicating clearly to a mass audience. Look, it's a work in progress. I'm still writing it.
I'm on
Um,
board.
okay. When science is communicated to the general public, it's usually sensationalized for clicks by media
Yeah.
experts. It's dumbed down to where it no longer communicates the essence of what was true in the research,
Yeah.
or government officials adopt it for their own agenda, and instead of representing what it actually says, they just push what they want it to say.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, like, in the UK, I know that look, it's bad here too, but in the UK, it is especially unsafe for trans people, and they all try to bring it back to frickin' science. Like
Yeah.
"Oh, a woman is a woman, and there's genes and there's chromosomes," but, like, if you actually look at the science, and I don't know why this isn't just, like, shouted from abroad from every possible source, chromosomal sex is not binary, right?
Mm.
Cultural gender is not binary across all of the cultures of the world, and even
Mm.
anatomical sex is not binary. Like, they're
Mhm.
just physically if you look at the science, there is no binary, and people use their high school science, and
Mhm.
that's incomplete and incorrect, and they think that that's the end, and it's not
Yeah.
communicated clearly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, no. That thing you learned in high school, that was just the beginning, right? Like I did teach music theory to high school students and I taught them triads and chord progressions, right? But like that's not all there is to music. If they think that that's all there is to music and they go into making music and that's all their limited understanding, they're not going to understand how these rules are actually so fluid. Anyway, this is again another tangent. But
Well,
the
it's a
point
tangent that I'm actually very passionate about because,
Yeah.
it's interesting to see the UK doing what it's the prime minister making open transphobic remarks.
Yeah.
And
Why? Well, I know why. It's to spawn fear in people and create an outsider enemy.
it's to spawn fear, but also it's interesting to be an American in the UK watching the UK look at all the bad ideas that the United States has come up with over the years and go, aha, let's do that
Yeah.
one. The increasing privatization of healthcare,
Hmm.
their student loan system here compared to the United States is sweet.
Yeah.
And they are like trying to ruin that.
Yeah.
And
Well, you know what? America's so good at making profits.
yes,
And
and that's what they're starting to realize here.
we could
is
be making
that,
so
you
much
know,
money if we just like, you know, disenfranchise people.
well, I mean, to be fair, I think the UK probably originated disenfranchising people for profit.
I mean, yeah, credit where credit's due.
We learned it from them, repackaged it.
Yeah.
We did what streaming services did to basic cable and are now
Yeah.
now repackaging basic cable as a streaming service. So
Yeah.
it's this all to me just comes back to power and living in a society, whether you are a trans person just trying to be a safe person and just live your life,
Yeah.
or a cis het person just trying to get through the day. Like we live in a system that's not set up for anybody to feel safe. And the more marginalized your identity, the less safe you are.
Yes, again, I have another song where, believe it or not, this is in the song, the less you conform to the socially constructed ideal, the greater is your doom. The song is called New Hotness.
Oh, it's just such a sad.
No, but it's a very happy, chipper song. Here's just a little, hold on, I'll get my ukulele, hold on.
I've never been serenaded while hosting a podcast, so this is pretty exciting for me, actually.
Well, you deserve to be serenaded.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is a song about like body image, but also understanding that you don't conform to the socially constructed ideal and you never will because it's impossible. It goes, we're lovable and lovely, but facing the world takes nerve, 'cause the world has views on who we are and tells us what we deserve. I'm about to swear. Is that okay?
Yep.
But fuck that noise, the world is wrong, and here's your true theme song. You're the new hotness, she's the new hotness, I'm the new hotness, we're all the new hotness. Everyone is struggling, no one is immune. The less you conform to the socially constructed ideal, the greater is your doom. Regardless of health or wealth or stealth, your body is yours. And hotness just means deserving of love in the face of pressure to conform. The world will be safer for everybody when all of us can sing along. You're the new hotness, she's the new hotness, I'm the new hotness, we're all the new hotness. Okay, that's like a little mini version of the new hotness song. Yeah. So it is, I know that's a dark sentence, but it's a happy, cheerful song.
I mean, it is a good theme song, to be fair. I interviewed my step sibling for the podcast a few weeks ago, and they live in Ohio, just not super great for trans folks. And the town that I live in, Brighton, is like the queer capital of the UK.
Yeah.
And yeah,
it's like Provincetown.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and
I live on Cape Cod, so.
Oh, okay. So I haven't been to Provincetown. I've heard tell of Provincetown, and similar vibes, right? And I was telling my step sibling, I wish for every queer person the existence that is here in Brighton, where you just walk around and like nobody cares. And you see a lot of other people who are going to identify similarly to you or differently, but it just is a safer space because there's more community here. It's still in a country that is not friendly towards trans people, and it's not free from, issues, of course. But the idea of the solidarity that exists with that, and I could just, as you were like singing, I was like, I can imagine sitting on Brighton Beach, like hearing people behind me playing this song and like or using it as a protest song.
Yeah. What you're talking about really is the cure for burnout. We call it the bubble of love. It's a community of people who care about your well-being as much as you care about theirs. But the point of the bubble of love is that it protects you from outside messages. Humans are a herd species. And when the lion comes, where's the safest place in the herd? The middle. Anybody who's on the fringes, literally and figuratively, gets eaten first. And the less you conform to the socially constructed ideal, the greater is your doom. But when you have your own herd of people around you who are like, this is the herd and you're in the middle of us, that's where you can get a sense of safety. But it is a perpetual struggle against the larger ocean. I have mixed so many metaphors here. The larger ocean of forces that are saying there is only one way of being in the world. Like, it is the Instagram way, and everyone must subdue. Having that little community around you that says, nope, nope, that big outside message, that's wrong. I know that the law says that you're not, entitled to human rights, but the fact is that you are. And we'll work together to make the law change gradually through the means that we have at our disposal. But in the meantime, you still deserve to, access sleep and take all the resources you need in order to flourish.
Oh, it's so sad that we have to remind people that they deserve to access sleep.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, again, the history of the Puritans and this work ethic of, it even gets communicated into social justice things where, I won't sleep until blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you need to sleep. Otherwise, you're not going to live very long in order to create any kind of change.
Yeah, I think one of the things when I read your book that was, so I used to be one of these, like 4 hours a night, and I functioned fine, no problem the next day. And
Yeah, you're fine. I'm sure you were fine.
oh, I was totally fine. I was thriving. And, then one day my body completely gave out. Surprise.
Oh my God, surprise. Who would have seen that coming?
Did I attribute that to only sleeping 4 hours a night? Absolutely not. I attributed it to like my own ability to be resilient. And it's so funny now. I'm so precious about sleep now.
Me too.
Yeah.
Emily and I literally text each other our Fitbit sleep results every morning.
This is adorable.
I got 9 hours. How about you? I only got 7.
Is this like a friendly sister competition?
It's a little bit, and also like a pity me. I only got 3 hours of sleep last night.
Yeah, well,
you better go take a nap, girl.
Honestly, it's funny because my partner and I we share stats as well. And, mine are all better because I put effort into it. And he's always like, it's not fair. And I'm like, do you know how much effort it takes for me to get this much sleep?
Exactly.
We just forget how important it is.
No, we are explicitly told that we don't deserve it, that we ought to be doing other things. Of course we forget because the world tells us that we don't matter, that our sleep doesn't matter, that our ability to be healthy and wealthy and wise does not belong to us. It's not an entitlement that we have. And we don't deserve it. Yeah, that we're supposed to squeeze ourselves empty like tubes of toothpaste until we have nothing left to offer and then discard it.
What has been for you after writing your book and sort of learning these lessons? What's been the biggest thing that you've changed about your own sort of habits and way of being?
The primary thing that changed through writing the book is that Emily and I went from being people who grew up in the same house together to being sisters. Like, we read the research on connection. Look, we grew up in a shit swamp of a childhood. Like, this is a lot of adverse childhood experiences. Our score is very high. And nobody in our family talked about feelings. Feelings weren't even a real thing. They were made up. Nobody actually had them. What are you talking about? And then we started reading, we were doing like the science of burnout and reading that, God, the solution, the cure is love. Damn it. Even the science says so. So we started doing the work of like talking about things we had never talked about because we had been explicitly taught not to talk about, difficult childhood moments and stuff that we finally talked about. Like, if you can imagine like each of us sitting on like one side of a wall, kind of like shyly, casually going like, hey, do you want to tear this wall down? And like brick by awkward stunted brick being like, yeah, I want this wall down too. Like, yeah, it's basically, do you want to build a snowman? Yeah. And people have asked us like, well, what if I don't have anybody in my bubble? What do I do? And at first we were like, what, really? That's a question. But we didn't really have bubbles here before we went into the book. And we realized that the solution is that so many people are hiding behind those walls because those walls were constructed by outside forces. Those walls were constructed by this ideal of like the lone hero, of like an individual great being that needing help is weakness.
Right.
And we've all been confined within walls because of that larger social message. And actually, everybody around us in their own little cubes, they also want those walls down, need those walls down, but they've been taught that they're not allowed, that it's shameful. And so, like that one brave person to be like, "Hey, I'd kind of like to take down this wall. Is that okay?" Because somebody around you really wants that wall down too. They're just afraid to ask.
That's such an important thing for people to understand, that we are not alone in feeling alone.
Loneliness is an epidemic that's followed the pandemic because of all the isolation, loneliness. I'm sure you talked about the health impacts of loneliness, but I mean, the greatest barrier to curing loneliness is social stigma, in my opinion.
It's funny because actually right before I started talking to you, I was talking to my therapist about how the UK is. I've lived in Asia. I lived in the Middle East. The UK is the loneliest place I've ever lived because it's so socially ingrained. They don't talk to their neighbors here.
Yeah.
Like my boyfriend didn't know his neighbors. And I thought that was the strangest thing. And it took COVID for us to actually meet our neighbors in London.
Wow.
So loneliness is something that I think the science is there, but as a society, I think the support needed to kind of tear down that wall brick by brick, or even just burst through it. People really need support to do that. And I think that that's something that you've offered through science and through your own experience with your book. And it's interesting because as you're telling me like, oh yeah, my sister and I had to create this love bubble, essentially, I can hear it in how you talk about her.
Yeah.
But I can hear how the way you talk about her, it's so sweet.
Oh.
And you can hear the love bubble in that. And that's contagious when you can hear.
Well, the good news is everybody has access to it because seriously, we had this like terrible, traumatizing childhood and undiagnosed autism. So like if we can do this, literally anybody can.
So I guess the final question to ask then after all that is, how do you feel about the term wounded healer?
Well, wounds, yeah. I have no pride about being like, yeah, I'm 100% wounded. Like it was my pain, my suffering that brought me to the need to do all the research that turned into like the stuff that I put in the book. And the idea of being a healer is foreign to me because I have difficulty with the transitive properties of healing, but that might be a linguistic question, like just words. But a facilitator of opportunities for learning to adopt. This is so many words. No wonder they just use the word healer.
But I bet there's a language out there that has a word that would be great.
Yeah, some other culture has a separate label for the person who facilitates healing. And whatever that word is, that's
Yeah. So who do you tell us?
Yeah.
Well, Amelia, where can people find you? Where can people find your work?
I'm pretty much not on social media anymore because it was bad for me.
Sure.
But what we've done since writing Burnout is try to make it more and more and more accessible. It's an 80,000 word book with 26 pages of references. It's what I needed, but it's not what everybody needed. So we wrote a workbook for the people who are just like, I don't need all the receipts, just I need results. So we made the workbook to make it more accessible. And then I just finished recording the audio workbook. So trying to make it even more accessible to more people.
Cool.
Yeah. So, and it has the complete new hotness song in it and a bunch of other songs too.
Cool.
Which is like the one place I was able to fit them in because you can't put songs in a workbook, like a piece of paper. Most people can't read me. Anyway, so they're in the audio workbook.
Love that. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today. It's been really fun. And I got a surprise song. So
Woohoo!
Thanks so much, Amelia.
Thank you.
Thanks to our guest for an amazing conversation today. To find out more about today's guest, you can visit www.headheartbiztherapy.com/podcast.
You can find Sarah at Head Heart Biz Therapy on Facebook and Instagram.
And you can find Anne at Spare Room Wellness or spareroomwellness.com.
Thanks as always to Andrea Klunder and the Creative Imposter Studios for editing, to Liam O'Donnell for the album art, and to Ben Mueller for our theme music. Until next time, bye-bye.